Well, good morning, friends. Mark Holmes here, of course, with my buddy Cowboy Joe Boo, as well as Joe Bear in the house. And as always, I want to thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report. Without you guys, as well as ladies, you know that this literally does not work. So let's get over to it. And let's wake up the football gods here on this Tuesday, Taco Tuesday. And I hope all of your taco dreams come true today because, hey, who doesn't like to have tacos? I know I dream about tacos on Taco Tuesday. But anyway, here we are at day number 2 of the Dallas Cowboys actually getting into OTAs. Now, this isn't the first workouts that they've had. They've had the captain's workouts for weeks before this, of course, where the Dallas Cowboys have some of the highest participation of players there at the Star working out. Most of the players live in and around the Dallas Metroplex area, and that's why they're here. They hang out together, they do stuff together, and they are working out together, of course, trying to become the best team that they can be. I have some news that may actually be good news for Kelvin Joseph. I was digging a little bit deeper, and I actually missed this from over the weekend. We all know that Kelvin Joseph was speaking with the police for several hours, getting of course, being interviewed about the whole situation that went down. At the same time, what also happened was the two guys that were allegedly the shooters ended up driving in, turning themselves into police, and confessing to the homicide. So that may end up being that they ended up not implicating Kelvin Joseph as anything to do with the shooting, which may be better for him as opposed to saying, hey, you want to get a lighter sentence for me, I'll roll on him and stuff. That still doesn't mean that he's out of the woods because the laws of party, basically because you were there with these guys and so on, that you could also be charged with it as well. We don't know, and we won't know for a while. Of course, there still could be punishment from the NFL as well as with the Dallas Cowboys. What we do know is he was there working out with his teammates at OTAs. So here's the thing. Everybody has killed the Cowboys like they always do. That the Cowboys are the biggest failures in the history of football, that they stink, that they're never going to do anything and all that. But this is the same thing we hear every year. Yes, we have not been to the Super Bowl in a long time. I agree. It is a travesty. And you can point your fingers at a lot of different places and all that. You can say that the Cowboys don't try and go that extra mile and try and get, those big-name free agents. This time last year we were looking at the Giants when they had pulled in, Galladay, wide receiver. In past years we've seen the Eagles go out and get big play Slay. And we've seen a lot of teams go through and get a lot of free agents, big name ones, that end up not making a difference in them going all the way. Now, Tampa Bay and the Rams, that was two different situations, but those were two teams that were already good teams to begin with. Tampa Bay, the year before Tom Brady got there, Jameis Winston had 30 touchdown passes. He had receivers. His problem was he had 30 interceptions. Their defense was already stout. But Tom Brady coming in there was enough to basically take him over the hump, along with Gronk and Ndamukong Suh and the other guys. But they had the core group of people there. If you have a team that doesn't have a core group of people and is already heading in the right direction, you can't buy enough free agents to turn them around. The Rams, they had really good pieces. They just ended up having a couple extra pieces to be able to get them over the hump, because when Jefferson got injured, which was a major part of their offense, they go out and they get Odell to replace him. So they didn't have that step down in talent because they lost a guy. That's where free agency helps you. And it's ultimately not your starters that win you that championship. It ends up being those guys that are forced to become starters that make the difference. We've seen where we go from Tyron Smith to Chaz Green, and it's a major drop-off, and all of a sudden everything goes to shit. So that's the key on here, is making sure that you not only have good frontline guys, but you also have second-tier guys that are good. Now, the thing that Dan Quinn loves to have multiple players that he can roll in there, keep them fresh on the defense. And you could look at our team and say, our team's biggest problem has been physicality and stopping the run. You know, we lose Randy Gregory. And I'm not going to say that Randy Gregory was not a talent, that Randy Gregory could be a force. Randy Gregory was good. But also with that good, you have to also take the bad. Randy Gregory sometimes would have the penalties at the worst times. And a 15-yard penalty is almost inexcusable with some of the ones that you get, especially when you are needing to get the ball. It's third down and all that and long, and you have a tackle the offensive lineman, and now they've got a first down at 15 yards. Those are things that also go with there. Randy Gregory, I will say that last year, because, of course, no suspensions and actually having training camp, was a really good year for Randy Gregory. He ended up putting in a lot of pressures last year. Put in a couple of quarterback hits in there. Had 6 sacks. Now, we ended up losing him, of course, and not paying him $70 million. Now, 2 years from now, we'll look and see, was that a good move, actually, him going as opposed to staying? He was not exactly a spring chicken anymore. Was 29 years of age. Not a lot of miles on him, but still, you looked at it and said, the upside should be there. Enter Dante Fowler. And sometimes the moves you make, the ones that don't seem to be the big splash ones, are the ones that are really the better ones. Let's take Jaron Kearse. How many people last year when Jaron Kearse was signed said, oh my God, we got Jaron Kearse, man. We're set at safety right now. We're set at safety. Instead, people said, we got to get Jamal Adams, man. Let's make a trade for a couple number ones for him because we have to get that guy. But quietly, Jaron Kearse, who had been a journeyman playing with the Minnesota Vikings, okay? Minnesota his first 4 years, and then Detroit, okay? Never had more, and you can look right here. His best season was actually the year before in Detroit. 59 tackles, right? 59 tackles, 18 assists, 1 quarterback hit. That was it. It was nothing special. And you looked at that and said, yeah, well, this is just a role player. But he gets there in Dallas with Dan Quinn, and all of a sudden, he gets a sack, okay? He ends up having 101 total tackles, 67 solo tackles, 6 quarterback hits, and gets himself a contract with the Cowboys. You didn't expect that when we signed him. And you look at that and say, quietly, he made a major impact for your defense in a multitude of ways because he ended up being the guy calling out the defense. So instead of Micah Parsons having to call out the defense, Micah Parsons could focus in on getting to the quarterback's ass. That, my friends, was a great free agent signing. And in the past, we've had guys before that have been journeyman players that they come to the Cowboys and all of a sudden they step it up big time or they rejuvenate a career. You take a guy like a George Selvey. George Selvey, who played for St. Louis, Tampa Bay, or Jacksonville. He played for 3 teams for 3 years, his first 3 years, and had 3 sacks. He came to the Cowboys and had a 7-sack season his first year. That was an incredible turnaround. And it wasn't one of those ones that you expected to happen with a guy like George Selvey. I say all this, and you're probably sleepy right now. I say this because it brings me to Dante Fowler. Now, Dante Fowler, a lot of people are like, oh, man, this mother humper, man, I don't know, man. He's a bum. Well, quite frankly, he's only 27 years old. 27 years old. He's not old. In fact, he's younger than Randy Gregory. Former first-round draft pick. And when you look at his numbers, and this is where I love using Pro Football Focus, when you look at his numbers, sacks-wise, first year, 4 sacks, 8 sacks, 4 sacks, 2 sacks, 2 sacks. And then with the Rams, in 2019, just a few years ago, 11.5 sacks. Well, that's really good. He goes to Atlanta. The next 2 years, he's got 3 sacks and 4.5 sacks. Good thing you can say is he did play in 16 games for the Rams. He did play in 14 games for Atlanta and 14 games. Now, here's the thing, because I know what you're saying. 4.5 sacks. Man, this guy's a bum. Well, this is where I want to actually dig a little bit deeper here. First of all, let's look at this down here. He played in 14 games, but he only started 6. He had those 4.5 sacks, 36 tackles, 21 tackles, solo tackles, 8 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for loss. Pedestrian numbers. But here's the thing, and we can compare this to Randy Gregory. He actually had more solo tackles than Randy Gregory. Quarterback hits, Randy Gregory doubled them, of course, but Randy Gregory had more time. Sack-wise, Randy Gregory had 1.5 sacks more. But interestingly, they both had 3 forced fumbles. So our numbers here aren't, earth-shattering. Now, here's another little take on this that I think is very interesting. If we go to the Atlanta Falcons' defense, their defense was terrible. They were 29th in yardage, I think 26 in points. They were a bad defense. If we go through and we look at the guys on that defense, here's what's crazy is they didn't sack anybody. Dante Fowler led the team in sacks with 4.5. Dante Fowler in quarterback hits was second on the team in quarterback hits. Dante Fowler was second on the team in tackles for loss. So let me say this. When you're game planning against a team, your first thing is who is the best guy that can blow us up? We're going to make sure we take care of that guy. You're going to take him out the game. So Dante Fowler was actually the focal point of the defense. Because here's where defenses are better. If you've got a great pass rusher on one side, he makes everybody else better. Micah Parsons makes everybody else better because everybody is worried about Micah Parsons. If D-Law is healthy and playing the way he should, he's getting double teamed. If you have Micah Parsons who's there too, he's getting double teamed with the running back helping out. Because you're worried about D-Law, you're worried about Micah Parsons. And then if you have an OC who will be in a second year that's coming up and is great with using his hands, all of a sudden you start saying, well, we also have to worry about that guy. And then if you end up having, of course, the Canadian bulldozer who should be recovered completely from the elbow, who can be a force in the middle as well. Now you've got all these other guys here that are also teams are worrying about. You can't double team everybody. You can't stop everybody. So when you look at that from the standpoint of him just going to a defensive front that is that much better than Atlanta, his play will step up. Take him with, of course, now Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, who's now able to work with him in OTAs and so forth, will make him a better player. So in the same sense where we look at a Jaron Kearse, who came to the Cowboys and went from 59 tackles to 101, you could look at that same trajectory. So it's not difficult to look and say, can Dante Fowler end up having, say, 8 sacks in a rotation with the Dallas Cowboys? That's not a reach. And we've seen over and over again, even from a guy like Robert Quinn, who was, well under 10 sacks every year for like 5 years. He came to the Cowboys and he went up to 11.5 sacks, got a big fat contract to play with the Bears and rejuvenate his career. So to hear a guy who is excited about being here and working with Dan Quinn, I think that you're and looking to go ahead and solidify a contract, being a contract year for him because it's a 1-year deal. You're looking at a guy who you may see that this off season that we say, hey, this guy, who knew? And sometimes you'll get better production from these smaller guys, these hungry guys, as opposed to the big contracts where the big payday is there where, you know what, I got my money. I got my money and, you know, I'm kind of in the twilight of my career. I don't have to work quite as hard. And that's where I look at this and say, maybe he'll be the guy we look at and say, yeah, that was a great free agent signing. And we'll finally say, Randy who? All right, so let's go to Total Access and get their thoughts on how the Cowboys can fix their weaknesses.
When we're talking about losing a big receiver, you can't forget about Dallas letting Amari Cooper walk out the door. They did re-sign Michael Gallup, which was huge, but I don't think that was necessarily their issue, especially when they got knocked out in that wild card round of the playoffs. So what was the weakness that was exposed there? I think quite a few when they lost to the 49ers, really.
Where do you want to start? I mean, there's a long laundry list of things.
Here we go.
When you break down that game and you watch what happened, I just wasn't happy if I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. First of all, physically, they got beat up. They got beat up in the trenches. Their O-line got beat up front. The receivers didn't show up. They got beat up outside. And they didn't run the football. Part of being a physical team is running the football and having that balance. The run game was invisible. All right, now, I don't know if that has anything to do with the play calling or going into the game. If you want to slow down teams, if you want to play a certain style, regular season, that's one thing. But in the playoffs, things change. And I got to put some of this on the coaches. Kellen Moore, as the play caller, did not make in-game adjustments, did not make halftime adjustments. I didn't see him make half the season after the bye adjustments. Like, nothing really changed for them. So there's a lot of things with the discipline and the team not playing well and self-inflicted things that held them back. This is a really good football team, and I just think some of the coaching, the way they played the game, and the situational stuff held them back from being a great football team.
Yeah, it's all really good stuff. You nailed it. You said this is a really good football team, could be a great team. Now, how do you get from good to great? You've been on a lot of really good teams that were great teams, right? Good personnel, which the Cowboys have. They have great personnel. You got a great quarterback. You still have enough skill positions to go out there and do that. You got two good backs. You got CD. Gallup will come back and be fine. I think you need to look at what your identity is, like you mentioned. They got out physical. Then when you lose in the playoffs like they lost, I think I pinpoint that game as the one game that could change what the opponent will do coming up next year, right? That's like you look at yourself and say, wait, I'm Mike McCarthy. I've ran the football before. I've been physical. I like to play that style of football. Have we kind of gotten away from that? The Cowboys, historically, when they've been great, when I was younger, growing up watching these guys play, they would get behind those 5 offensive linemen and they'd move bodies forward. I think you have to get back to some of that because that'll help your quarterback. We'll touch on it later in the car shop. Dak's gonna win. But these guys need to get that physicality back and start to take the fight to other teams instead of trying to go out there and throw for 5,000 yards, which ultimately, at the end of the year, it gets you nothing because you don't have the personality and the grit to go out there and finish in the playoffs like you know you have to.
And the penalties and all
that
things
stuff. Administrative stuff was terrible.
Yeah,
Michael Parsons said it perfectly once we got into the offseason. They cannot beat themselves. Those 14 penalties, second most in a playoff game in NFL history. Unacceptable. Can't do it. Just can't do it. All right, let's get you caught.
Okay, so, you know, here's where, of course, the haters will look and say, well, it's Dak Prescott's fault. You know that Zeke Elliott ran 2.6 yards per carry, 31 yards. Tony Pollard, 3.5 yards for 14 yards, and 14 penalties in a playoff game. Those are things that we cannot do, and we'll see if the Cowboys can get back to being a physical football team. We'll have more, of course, on that later on as we go into the draft, and that needs to be the mindset for the Cowboys of how can we get to be more physical, the way that San Francisco 49ers came in and beat the crap out of us. But you know, it's time to roll up out of here. I hope to see you guys soon.
Mark Holmes here, and as always, I want to thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report.
You did one hell of a job, and the only thing else I got to say is